Out of all my strange experiences, this is probably the most compelling I had, simply because I was not alone when it happened. I was not with just the average kind of people either. I'll put in as much detail exactly as I remembered them, so this may be long. I can't mention the name of the company I work for to protect my job, but it's one of the largest telcos in the Philippines, which is synonymous with the word world. I currently work as one of the senior IT network and server engineers there. I usually get assigned to work on priority repairs on various cell sites and server data centers, mostly in far-flung provinces. This happened in mid-December of 2018 in Nueva Vizcaya, mountainous province in the northern region of the Philippines. It was a priority service call, Sera T1, the highest of priorities, wherein even the CEO of the company received status updates, since the cell site in question also services various military communications devices. As soon as I got into the office, I was dispatched immediately, carrying with me various equipment to replace the existing ones at the cell site. It was a 6-hour drive from Manila. I was asked to go to a specific meeting point in the town nearest the cell site to rendezvous with my escort, an 8-member team from the Philippines 1st Army Scout Ranger Regiment. The area of the cell site is a place where the local communist movement, the New People's Army, is highly active. Apparently, the NPA carried out an operation early in the morning of that day, which caused some of the damage to the equipment. The team I met up with was led by one of my former high school classmates. Let's call him Lieutenant Knox. He had even specifically asked for me as he knew I worked for the telco. He had his men transfer the equipment to their truck, and we began to travel to the cell site. It was already dark at the time. During the long uphill ride, Lieutenant Knox and I did some catching up when they suddenly received a call. I don't understand military speak, so I could not tell exactly what we talked about, but he updated us accordingly, saying that a village on the way to the cell site requested assistance with a possible NPA member harassing a household. Apparently, the man had climbed up on the roof of someone's house, and he was still in the area. Being the nearest, Lieutenant Knox responded that his team would be handling it, so we drove towards the area, keeping the headlights turned off. The countryside, especially the poorer places, are very dark. Soldiers aren't allowed to smoke at night in places like these, since the light from their cigarettes could be clearly seen even from afar, giving away their position. It was that dark here. I was hesitant since I'm not exactly a soldier, but he brushed it off, saying it would be a good chance for me to become a soldier for at least one night. Lieutenant Knox, I can say, is a battle-hardened junior officer. He's been to a number of dangerous situations and has fought in many encounters, both high-profile and low-key. He's the type of guy to jump in quickly then ask questions later. I remember him being like that even in school, a very cocky individual, but not entirely without cause, especially now that he was in the army. He even received a medal recently, although I wasn't sure for what. Either way, he said, we're going in. It's part of the job. Now, you have to understand the Philippine Army usually does the police work in these areas where communists, Muslim insurgents, or bandits are active. And when you send in the scouts, the best our military has to offer, you can get an idea of the kind of situation it places in. Even other countries recognized the abilities of the Philippine Scout Rangers, all the more so in this case since these scouts came from the 1st Regiment. They're the best the scouts have to offer, from what I was made to understand. We got to the place a little over 5 minutes after, with me still having second thoughts. Dude, make up your mind. Either you shadow me or I leave you in the truck. But if you stay here, you're gonna be free dinner for the commies. Can't spare you a babysitter for this one, he explained to me. So he made the choice easier for me. I didn't have plans to be abducted, I was already soiling myself, basically not cut out for this stuff. I just wanted to repair the cell site and go home, but I did have plans to get his wife to get back at him for this. "Here," he said, handing me a loaded 9mm and 2 clips. "I know you're used to this one, and the safety's on." I sat there thinking I wasn't getting paid enough for this job, and I recalled my company insurance policy. It doesn't even cover sports-related injuries, let alone anything you'd see in a firefight. But I didn't have time to dilly-dally, so I stuck with my friend instead of waiting for someone to drag me into the woods and getting held for ransom, which no one's gonna pay for, let's face it. The plan was for 6 of his men to break off into 3 pairs to surround the house in question. Me, Knox, and his sniper Mason were to head over to the water tower about 60 meters out. I guess he planned to snipe the guy and have his men stand by on the ground in case the sniper missed. As we trekked over to the water tower, he told me, "You're too stiff, man. You're wearing dark clothes. No one's gonna see you. We'll be in and out in 10 minutes. You're a VIP, and that's why I came and had my sergeant stay with the platoon at the cell site, so don't worry so much." I didn't know VIPs had to join in responding to calls like this, but the scouts were undermanned as it was already, and that's why my friend needed to multitask at the moment. When we got to the water tower, Private First Class Mason immediately positioned himself, and Lieutenant Knox sat beside him while I positioned myself behind. At that time, I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, this wasn't so bad. I'm far and safe away from that area. But then I heard Mason say, "Sir, you need to see this." Knox brought out some type of binoculars, I guess they call it an NV scope. I couldn't see his reaction because it was dark, but he was silent for a moment as he put down the binoculars. "What in the world," was all Knox could whisper. He then turned to me and asked me to look at the direction he pointed and to tell him what I saw. I was initially concerned, thinking that there were more NPAs now and that we were outnumbered. A reaction like this from a seasoned scout didn't exactly paint a nice picture in my mind. But what I saw was definitely something that will probably haunt me for the rest of my life. I wish I hadn't taken those binoculars at all. I even wish I saw more communists instead of what I did see. The image was green, and I saw someone on the roof of a house. It was a man. He didn't have a shirt on, nor did he have any weapons on him. He had very short hair or a shaved head, and he was barefoot. He had jeans on, but the lower part was wrapped from what I could tell. He had dark skin and seemed normal at first glance, but then I noticed his arms, which were very, very long. His hands were almost past his knees, and his fingers were also very long and pointed. The fingers were longer than normal and had tips that looked like long nails or even claws. The first thing on my mind was, this can't be real. "Sir," Mason said, "it's moving." I didn't expect what happened next. The thing, whatever it really was, looked right at our group. Even from that distance, it was unmistakable. He or it had its head turned in our direction, and its eyes were solid white. Eye shine, like a cat's eyes. Right then, I nearly dropped the binoculars. Had it not been strapped to my wrist, it probably would have fallen straight through the grated flooring of the water tower. Knox looked to me as if asking what I saw, and all I could say was, "It looked at us, man. It knows we're up here." Almost at the same time, Mason begged, "Sir, your orders." My friend gave the order to put 2 in its head. I think the first shot hit the mark because we heard a scream echo throughout the valley. It sounded like a mix of a high-pitched male screaming and a cornered animal crying out in pain. I'm not sure how to describe it beyond that, but it was the first time I'd ever heard such a sound. I'm sure all of us heard it because of how loud the sound was. Mason never let out a second shot. I don't know if he did so on purpose or if he was caught off guard, but we then heard automatic rifle shots in the distance. Knox immediately told us to go. Mason went down the ladder first at a ridiculous rate, then me, then Knox. Back on the ground, we ran over to the house. These guys were fast and easily outran me. Knox had to basically drag me along the way so I wouldn't be left behind. Honestly, I was reluctant to run where we were headed. I wasn't as hardcore as these scouts. I could barely even keep myself from soiling myself. There was still someone firing in the direction towards the tree line. When we got to the house, near the front, we found one of the soldiers sitting against the wall. His buddies seemed to be applying first aid. His left forearm had a long and nasty gash that leaked fiercely onto the soil. I wanted to vomit. He reported to Knox that something jumped up from the roof and landed right on top of him. It was just after Mason fired. While he didn't get a good look at the attacker due to the darkness, he specifically refused to call it human. Even his buddy didn't think it was human at all. The other 4 soldiers got back to us, saying that the assailant got away. Knox decided to get to know the people in the house, and we found out that a young couple lived there. In fact, the woman was 7 months pregnant. They had texted their local village official, who in turn requested the military to check since, again, they suspected it was an NPA. The 3 of us, Knox, Mason, and me never told anyone, even the couple, what we saw that night. We simply stated it was a machete-swinging communist trying to rob the couple. After all, the NPAs were known to resort to banditry. A while after that, we finally made our way to the cell site. I simply couldn't stop shaking. When we got there, I immediately got to doing my necessary repairs. Knox and Mason stuck to their story when the rest of their platoon asked about it regarding the recent encounter. They never mentioned anything about the man's description nor the strange animal sound. After working an all-nighter and making sure the cell site was operational, Knox and his men minus the injured one took me back to the town where I had parked my car as soon as daybreak came. As his men loaded the damaged equipment I replaced into my car, Knox talked to me. At first, he was trying to joke around, saying I could probably enlist in the regular army now since I had some first-hand experience. I went along with this for a moment, hoping to forget about the strange incident. But inside, I was utterly horrified. However, before I was able to drive away, Knox said to me, "Dude, Mason, we saw the same thing you did. You know what it was, don't you?" I never responded, but inside, I think I knew what he was talking about. The aswang, a mythical creature from Filipino folklore, the stuff of a Filipino child's nightmares. The description, the sound, it was the only thing that made sense explaining what the thing was during the Spanish era from the 1500s to 1890. These creatures were said to be once human who were supposedly blessed by the moon priestesses of old called Baba even, so that the people could have the power to fight the Spanish colonizer who had done them wrong. It is said that the Spaniards decided to persecute these priestesses for witchcraft, then spread tales that aswangs attacked locals and foreigners alike. The aswang is a creature said to be able to shape-shift into either a human or an animal, but it is never able to correctly imitate one or the other. As a human, it has leathery black skin and disproportionate limbs. As an animal, like a cat or dog, it is always black and 3 times the normal size. It can neither speak nor do animal calls, it can only grouch out or scream. They usually eat the flesh of recently deceased humans and animals, but have a strange preference for the ill or pregnant women. Pregnant women like the one in the village. They can never become human again, and being in a swang is hereditary. No one will turn if attacked by one, although the wounds they inflict are often fatal. This is what Knox and I were both thinking, but I'd always considered it just that, just folklore. Yet there's no denying that what we saw that night wasn't human. I have never been back to the general area after, while Knox and his team had been dispatched to the south dealing with ISIS members. Before I posted this, I asked them about that night. It's hard to imagine a soldier of his caliber believing in such tales. I find it even harder as I write this to believe what I saw was real. But no matter how hard I try to come up with an explanation, I couldn't, except for the idea that it truly was an aswang, the legend passed down by our forefathers. Knox said to me in reply, "I told you before, you and I both know what the thing was." I go with what I see, and most of the time, I don't have the luxury of time to doubt whatever is in front of me. I don't know if I'll ever know the truth, and I can't be sure if I even want to know. I first heard this story when I was in college. I'd come home for winter break, and I remember it was just me and my dad in the house. I was watching some kind of ghost hunter program on TV just for laughs. I don't really believe in that stuff, though when you watch the programs on TV, they're just so obviously fake. It's too hard for me to let go of my preconceptions and just watch and try to get into it. My dad was the same way, so I thought. He didn't seem interested in the paranormal or anything. He was kind of the guy who would scoff at anything supernatural. The program I was watching flipped to a commercial, and I casually got up and found my dad in the kitchen. Kind of out of the blue, I asked him, "Hey Dad, do you believe in ghosts?" His reply was so casual it shocked me. "Really?" I asked, a bit taken aback. "It just doesn't seem like you." He shrugged his shoulders and mulled over what I had just said. "Yeah," he replied, "eventually, but I know ghosts are real. I've met one." Upon hearing this statement, I had to know the story. You see, my dad is like me, he likes to tell stories. I could retell most of his stories from memory. Just because he would tell them so frequently to anyone who would listen, yet here was a story I had never heard of. An event that changed my dad's life. To this day, I don't even know if I believe it or not, but when someone who is so influential on your life, someone who seems so logical and so down to earth, tells you something like this, he calls into question what you believe and why. Though he never brings it up, when I talk to him about it, he swears it's completely true, no exaggeration and no doubt in his mind about what happened. So here it is, from his point of view. I was back in the house in Tacoma where you grew up until you were about 4. My parents still lived in the house, but I was going to college. I was back visiting them for a weekend. I was just over at Tacoma Community College, so it wasn't far away. I came back often to visit and get a home-cooked meal. I remember that I was sitting down for dinner with my parents, just the 3 of us. It was in the late spring, early summer season, so it hadn't really gotten dark yet. We were talking like normal when the phone rang in the kitchen. My mom got up and answered the phone, leaving my dad and me in the other room together alone. After a short while, she called my dad into the kitchen as well. "Leo, can you come here for a moment?" I remember that she seemed worried, her voice was kind of shaking a bit. My dad wiped his face, got up, and joined my mom in the kitchen. They weren't in there for long, but they were talking quietly, and it felt strange. After a few moments, they finally came out of the kitchen. They had their coats on now. "Something's come up, and we have to go out for a bit," my mom said. "There's dessert in the fridge. Help yourself. Don't worry about the dishes, I'll wash them when we get back." My dad said nothing, but I could tell from his face that it was serious. My mom looked genuinely worried. They were out that door in a flash, and I was left to finish my dinner at the table. I cleared the table and washed my plate despite my mom's instructions, and I went into the main room to read. I sat down on the sofa, opened one of my school books, and began to relax. Hours went by, and my parents still hadn't come back. It was now around 11 o'clock, and I was just about to get ready for bed. I walked up the stairs, making my way to the bathroom when I heard a strange noise. I paused and listened for a while. It was the ceiling. The ceiling was making a slow, drawn-out whining noise. The wood was creaking gently. It wasn't an unusual sound, but there was an unusual rhythm to it that made me uncomfortable and curious. After listening for a while, I pulled down the steps to the attic and listened a bit more. I could hear the sound more clearly now, along with a metallic creaking noise. I gathered up my courage and decided to investigate. I climbed the steps. Now, I have to say, I wasn't scared. I didn't have an uneasy feeling, actually, to the contrary. I felt quite comfortable. Even though it was dark and eerie, the energy in the room wasn't foreign, it almost felt warm and inviting. As I looked around the attic, it quickly became obvious where the sound was coming from. Among the boxes and various other storage was an old rocking chair that belonged to my grandmother. It was one of many possessions that she had left with us at the house. She was in a nearby home for the elderly and couldn't fit much of her belongings in her room. The rocking chair was gently rocking back and forth, causing the floorboards to creak beneath it. Next to the chair, an old birdcage was displaying similar behavior. The cage door was gently swinging open and closed, making a quiet metallic creak. I figured there was a draft, and knowing that the sounds would keep me up all night if I didn't put an end to it, I set out in search of the source. I combed the corners of the room, but try as I might, I couldn't find the source of the draft, nor could I feel it myself. There were no windows, and there wasn't much ventilation. It wasn't even windy outside, it was a calm evening. Furthermore, the chair was heavy, as was the birdcage. Yet, there were other things nearby that weren't disturbed, stacks of paper and the like. After a while, I gave up and looked back to the chair. It was still gently rocking. I walked over to it and rested my hand on the armrest. The chair stopped rocking. Still, I couldn't feel any kind of draft. I lifted my hand, and the chair was calm and quiet. But as I turned away, I heard the creaking again. I turned back, and the chair was still rocking. It was really strange, but as I had said before, I wasn't really that creeped out yet. I shrugged it off and walked over to the birdcage. The door was still swinging open and closed. The cage had once housed a parrot belonging to my grandmother, but it had been empty for some time. I latched the cage shut, figuring I could at least stop this one sound. I made for the steps, but just as I was about halfway down, I heard the metallic creaking again. I looked behind me, and the cage door was back to swinging open, unlatched, right alongside the chair, which continued rocking as before. Something had caused it to unlatch. I was sure that I had latched it properly. In any other circumstance, I would have been scared out of my mind, but for whatever reason, I wasn't. I just didn't feel uneasy. A rocking chair and a birdcage aren't really the harbingers of doom anyway. I descended from the attic with a last glance at the strange behavior and went about my bedtime routine. The creaking continued for a while, and I couldn't sleep for it. I went back upstairs and made another attempt to find the source. I went back downstairs to where I couldn't hear the noise, and I continued reading. It was a little after midnight when I heard my parents pull into the driveway. They came in and found me reading, and they sat down with me. My mom was crying. They explained to me that they had spent the evening at the hospital where my grandmother had just passed away. That's the story as my dad tells it. He believes to this day that before she left this world, his grandmother came home to pay him one last visit. At the time of this story, I brushed it off, but it sends chills down my spine whenever I think about it. I served in the U.S. military, in the Marines, for 7 years, and I've been deployed overseas for 2 tours, each lasting 3 to 4 months, during 2003 and 2004 in Afghanistan. During my second tour in 2004, I remember it was August during a hot summer night in the desert. We were heading back to camp and driving in 2 separate jeeps. One of the privates, Mika was his name, leaned over from the back seat and said to me, "Hey sir, can you let off the AC a little bit?" I replied to him, "Private Mika, the AC is on setting 2 out of 5. We're almost to camp, so just hang in there." Another private, by the name of Noah, who was sitting in the passenger seat, said, "Sir, I'm freezing. It feels like we're in Alaska." I replied, "Privates, I don't feel this cold you're talking about." To make my squad happy, I went ahead and turned off the AC in the Jeep, even though I knew it was going to be a hot 4 miles ahead until we got back to base. I looked over to Private Noah and asked, "You feel better?" But I was cut off from completing my sentence when Orion said over the walkie-talkie, "Sarge, confirmed visual of an enemy sniper in the church tower window." I immediately replied, "How sure are you? This place was secured 4 months ago." I grabbed a pair of binoculars and looked into the church tower, and suddenly my stomach began to turn when I saw that the lookout was not lying. I quickly ordered both jeeps to turn behind the building so that the sniper could not see the squad inside his scope. I yelled to Orion from my walkie, "I need you to take a shot, keep it silenced. If there's one in the tower, who knows how many else there are." Several moments passed before Orion took the shot and replied in the walkie, "Sarge, we have a direct hit, the sniper is down." I was relieved because this sort of situation, if left unmanaged, could be deadly for us or a future squad in the region. But then a few moments later, Orion was back on the walkie, "Scratch that, sir. He's back in the window and sir, he looks like he's laughing." I grabbed my walkie and angrily replied, "So keep shooting, take him down, roger that, sir," and a few more minutes went by when Officer Orion responded, "8 rounds fired, sir. Sniper appears to be down." We proceeded to drive our jeeps down the outskirts of the city, heading cautiously towards the church tower where the sniper had been spotted. We first cleared the buildings around the tower to make sure he wasn't alone, but apparently, he was. We found nothing but broken glass and furniture that was destroyed, and chunks of walls that were on the floor of the buildings. We finally walked toward the church tower. I slowly led the crew up inside the building. The basement level was the chapel, which was empty, nothing but destroyed pews and a knocked-over podium by the stage. I had 3/4 of the guys stay on the bottom level, and the rest went up with me to confirm Orion's kill. But as we ascended the stairwell, it felt insanely cold, and it only grew colder the further up we got. Did this church have functioning air conditioning? How in the world was it this cold in here? I was wondering as I began to reach the top. A sudden stench hit my nose and made my stomach sink, the smell of rot and decay. I poked my head around the corner slowly, weapon drawn and pointed out. I wanted to turn around so bad, but I knew that I had to complete my task. That room was clear, but I needed to head upwards. The body had to be found. When I reached the attic, I didn't find a body, but I did find broken glass from the window where the shots had come through. I spoke in the walkie-talkie and said that it could not be confirmed, thinking that the guy had escaped or he had been in a group and they had already left the proximity. Orion soon spoke up through the walkie and said, "You've got to be kidding me, sir." I saw him go down on the third shot. I was startled to see something written on the wall. In Arabic, the text was dark red, and to be honest with you, at first, I thought it was blood. I had to remind myself that this wasn't some horror film. I'd seen that lettering before, and I was more than sure what it said: home. My nerves were trembling at this point. I couldn't take it anymore and ran downstairs. After reporting this to my commanding officer, he hated the sound of it. He said that he didn't want us to come back until the soldier was captured or executed. I said, "Sir, yes sir," and we stayed all night looking for him. I did not mention what I saw upstairs to anyone in my squad because I didn't want to scare them. I was already a bit spooked, but even after another squad joined us as backup, we never found a trace of the sniper we'd seen. Long after the failure to locate this sniper, we never had to go back to that church or town, for that matter, and I was extremely thankful for that. But that doesn't mean it didn't stay in my head for a long time. We saw someone in that attic. We shot him around 8 times. We felt that chilling cold. It was impossible for it to be that cold out there. And the red word on the wall that said home, was it this ghost sniper's plea of what he wanted, or was it a warning for us to get away? I'll never know for sure. It was a Memorial Day weekend, so my friend group rented a lakefront house for the weekend 3 hours away from home. It was cheap because it was in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina. It was Callista, Cara, Zelda, Mia, Cheryl, and myself. We all piled into Cheryl's truck. I was the one to find this place on Airbnb, and what was most appealing about it was the big deck with the hot tub on it that overlooked the lake. There was also a fire pit right by the water with a bunch of Adirondack chairs around it. Everything about it seemed perfect for a few days and nights of getting wasted with some friends. The Airbnb host told me that when we got to the property, there was a hidden key behind the mailbox to unlock the front driveway gate. The driveway was made of gravel and dirt, and it cut through a small opening in the woods, bringing a slight uphill to a bigger opening where the house was. Cheryl parked the truck right next to the front deck. The deck wrapped around the entire house, which was pretty cool. The first thing I did was walk to the back part of the deck and look at the view of the lake. It was very beautiful and peaceful. Too bad we were about to be blasting music and partying. Right as we were done unpacking, everyone cracked open beers, and we wasted no time letting the weekend begin. We played beer pong, cornhole, barbecued, and blasted music for hours. We were really loud because, as far as we knew, this was the only house around here. It's not like there were any nearby neighbors to complain. The phone connection out there was very spotty, so we really were just living in the moment, socializing with each other, not distracted by social media and whatnot. As it was getting darker and we were sitting by the fire pit, we all got startled when a voice came from the edge of the woods. It was some middle-aged woman with short hair. She started yelling at us to lower the music, so someone lowered the volume of the music. The woman started more or less lecturing us, saying how we out-of-towners always come here, litter in the lake, and create nothing but noise. She seemed like genuine white trash. I apologized on behalf of all of us, and one of the girls asked the woman if she lived nearby and if she could hear the music. The woman responded, still in a yell, that she couldn't even hear herself think. She didn't acknowledge the other question regarding if she lived nearby. Then, she just walked away into the woods, like literally into the dark woods. It was so strange. When we were sure she was out of earshot, we all erupted into laughter. As bizarre as the encounter was, we had to make light of it, but it also did put a slight damper on things considering we thought for sure we were far enough away from any neighboring houses to blast music and be loud. But we continued to drink, and pretty soon that concern was forgotten about, and we got loud again. Some immeasurable amount of time passed before a song ended, and it went quiet for a second, and we heard a voice calling out from the lake. We paused the music and listened, and sure enough, a voice was calling out for help in the middle of the lake. We all looked at each other nervously. I stood up and went to the water and yelled out, "Who's out there? Are you in the water?" The voice called back, "Yes, help." Adrenaline started to kick in. There was a kayak leaned up against the deck by the water with 2 sets of paddles. Cheryl and I agreed to paddle out there in an effort to save whoever was out there. We yelled out at them to keep calling out, but as we got in the water, the calls seemed to get further away no matter how deep we got into the lake. After like 5 to 10 minutes of rowing out to the complete darkness of this lake, calling out repeatedly for that man, we heard it was just utter silence. All we could see were the lights from the house sitting at the edge of the lake, and then just darkness in every other direction. It was only the sound of the light splashes of water and then screams, female screams, coming from the direction of the house. They sounded gut-wrenching, like genuine screams of danger. It sounded like more than one, at least 2 of the girls' screams. We immediately started paddling back, even more panicked now. The screams stopped long before we got back to the shore. We screamed out for our friends, but we checked inside and outside of the cabin, and all 4 of them were gone, vanished without a trace. We tried texting and calling them, but we had no bars, of course. Cheryl's truck was still there, so we took it and drove up the road looking for the nearest neighboring house. We found it, a similar opening in the woods that led up a hill and onto a property where we saw a house with the lights on. We went to ring the doorbell multiple times, but no one ever answered. We went to look through one of the windows in the front, and what we saw sent chills up my spine. We could see clear as day into the living room. There was a lamp on in the corner, and in the middle of the room, somewhat close to the window, was that trashy woman we saw who came and yelled at us before. She was standing still, doing nothing, just facing the window looking out at us. She had a borderline angry-looking expression. We yelled, asking for help, but when she wouldn't move, we were too creeped out to stay there and left. As we got back in the truck, about to drive to another house, my phone started vibrating. It was Mia calling me. Thank God. I picked up and asked her they were and what happened, but I could barely get a word in as Mia said there were 2 men with axes in their hands wearing masks over their heads walking towards them out of the woods, and that's why the girls screamed and they all ran away down the road. One of them was currently on the phone with 911, and they were waiting. It was out in the woods right on the side of the road. It wasn't long after that the call disconnected, and I wasn't able to reach him again. So we waited on the side of the road, not far from the house. When we finally saw flashing lights coming down the road, we waved them down and asked them to help us find our friends first. We drove up the road until we saw our friends come out from the woods, waving their hands. We scooped them up and followed the police back to the house. Once there, we collected all of our belongings as Mia and the girls frantically recounted what they had just gone through. Oddly enough, the Airbnb was not broken into, and none of our stuff was taken. There was no sign of any men with axes. We also told the police about the cries for help in the lake, which I believe prompted a search team to come to the scene. By then, we were already long gone from that place. We never looked back. After much persistence and battling with Airbnb and the host, we got our money back for the stay, well, most of it. None of us could ever figure out this situation, like if it was all a trap. If the calls for help from the lake were linked with the men approaching the house with the axes, and if that woman was also affiliated somehow with this. Was it just to scare us out of there, or were they really going to attack us? I don't know, and I don't care. I just don't do remote places anymore after this, and I know the girls won't either. It was around noon on Memorial Day of 2017. My car was in the shop for a few days, so to the outside world, it would seem that no one was home. I was sitting in the living room watching television when I noticed a shadow being cast from the window behind me. I thought nothing of it as the window faces the street, and our front lawn is not very big. To me, it seemed like someone was just walking down the road, no big deal. Almost simultaneously, however, someone passed by the window to the carport heading to our side door. I went to check it out, and before I got to the door, he knocked. When I answered the door, I saw him in a white duct-taped motorized scooter, now under our carport. He told me he had been walking down the road pushing his scooter and he was wondering if he could rest for a moment. It was a hot day, and I could tell he had been walking. I decided to give him a break and let him sit under my carport for a minute. I even gave him a mellow yellow from the fridge, thinking if he had a cool drink, he would leave as soon as he was finished. I returned to my living room. Then there was another knock, but this time on the front door. I answered it, and this guy was asking if we were selling a scooter here. I told him no, and he apologized and then walked off. I closed the door and looked outside the window and saw that the guy in the scooter was still there. At this point, I was really suspicious, as most people would be. I decided to make something up to get the guy to leave by saying my friend was about to be here and that he needed to park there. When I opened the door, I asked him if he was feeling all right now, and he told me he was just resting. Before I could tell him my made-up excuse to get him to leave, the guy from the other door came from around the side of the house. He talked to the scooter guy and said, "Hey man, I've been looking everywhere for you. I thought you might have been stealing these people's scooter." They laughed for a moment and then both walked to the street with the scooter. I closed the door and decided to watch them from my front window. They both loaded the scooter in the back of a big red truck parked in the street that was not there when I talked to the front door guy. The driver was staring at the window I was looking out of, and after they got in, they took off. I called the police, and an officer came over almost immediately. I live a block from a police department. When I told the cop about what happened, he told me they had similar reports of a guy with a scooter casing houses, probably thinking that no one was home for the holiday. He told me that I probably scared them off since I was home. Still, though, I'm very lucky that they weren't violent. Every Memorial Day, I think about what happened. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.